And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. With the purpose of celebrating the uniqueness and individuality of every person, Personality Pageants is a unique Canadian-based organization. The pageant is more than a competition. It is a platform for personal growth, self-expression, advocacy, and empowerment. We begin today's Open Connection with Miss Queen Teen Canada, Alicia Danielson.
I'm from Pictou and Cree Nation. It's in Treaty 6. It is by Bonnyville, Alberta, and that's where I'm from.
Okay.
2021, my parents moved to Leduc, Alberta, so I lived there for about a year and a half on my grad year. And then after that, I ended up moving to Edmonton while my parents moved to Prince George. And I started working up in the Northwest Territories at a County Diamond Mine. And so I've been doing that. So that's where I reside. Honestly, I never figured that out. I'm 20 and I still don't know what I want to do. But at the same time, I've been taking courses with Indigenous Policy School. I just participated in Indigenous Advocacy Week based out of Ontario. And that was my ticket into Indigenous Policy School for September. So I think I want to take with that lead and work with my advocacy. Mostly about the policies and working with ministers and all those different things in Parliament Hill. For me, I run my own advocacy platform, which is Whispers Between the Braids, and it's based on Indigenous houselessness and shelters within here in Canada. And I want to take that further. So that's why I decided to pursue something with Indigenous policies, so that I can bring those issues up to higher ups. I developed my platform in 2023, I believe, and I post education on Indigenous houselessness here in Canada. Anything from stats to ways to help. I ran my own donation drives. I put together care kits for those. I work with different outreach teams in Edmonton specifically, and that almost grew overnight. I had a dream about a name for my platform, and it was Whispers Between the Braids, and I texted my mom at 4 a.m. being like, hey, I think I came up with a name for my platform. And it's just grown since then. It's became a huge platform, and it's a very big part of my life because I get to go do things like this where I get to talk about houselessness and youth empowerment and empowering and why youth empowerment is so important for young Indigenous peoples. During the Edmonton sweeps, when they were destroying all the encampments in Edmonton, that was when it really spoke to me, is that was an issue and nobody knew that was going on. Nobody knew that the police were coming in and taking rid of the tents in Edmonton and getting rid of all the tent cities. So I started up with Indigenous houselessness and the issue with that and all the intergenerational traumas and all of the traumas before that with the people now, because before that I was advocating for MMIW and I was running into so many dead ends with that, which drove me to finding houselessness because they intertwined so well. So I wasn't dropping one, I was intertwining both of them. Living here in Prince Rupert, the Highway of Tears, it was a part of me that I wanted to keep on because I have relatives that have passed away with MMIW, which I'm not going to speak on that specifically, but that was a huge part for me because I wanted to bring awareness to that. But I was running into so many dead ends because, one, I'm not a detective. I can't go and bring these things, and some of them are so hard to bring up to government issues like that because you get the same answers over and over and over again. And so when I went and discovered Indigenous houselessness, I found that domestic violence was a part of it and all the shelters and things like that. And that's why I drove with that, because the lack of shelters, the lack of traditional housing, the lack of housing period with Indigenous peoples, they all intertwine into MMIW. Well, with me, I'm not going to go and be like, oh, like this is horrible, like kind of thing. I like to bring it as a way of you're seeing more than what's outside your car window when you drive by. It's actually listening to these people and understanding what exactly brought them to that position in their life, rather than just being like, oh, well, they're houseless, they're poor, they're just drug addicts, rather than being like, why don't we supply harm reduction? Why don't we understand why things did end up this way? Why don't we support them? And that's what I like to do, is hear these people out and understand what really brought them to this position. And that's what I speak about a lot on my platform, is why did it happen? Here's some of the statistics on why some people might be houseless. Here's these things. Oh, look, there's no shelters in Edmonton. Oh, there's no housing room in Edmonton. And I speak about that a lot because it brings people to more of a sense than what they see out their car window. When I first started my platform, I started working with an outreach, which is Tawa Outreach, which is Welcome All in Cree. And I worked with them right in the beginning of when I started my platform, and I was able to go and onto the streets when they were doing the encampment suites and talk to these people and provide to them and hear their stories. On top of my own platform, I provide a blog page where people are able to message me and tell their stories and how they came out of houselessness. And that's opened a big window, and it's also opened other people's eyes, seeing that, oh, like I would have never expected that they were houseless. And they talk about why they became houseless and what brought them to this new way of living.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Like we're saying with us, both houselessness and homelessness describe people who lack stable housing, but the terms have different connotations. Homelessness is a common term that can evoke negative images of people living on the streets. It also can be used to dismiss, dehumanize, or demonize people experiencing homelessness. Houselessness highlight that people experiencing homelessness may still have a sense of community or belonging. Let us return the conversation with Alicia.
I was first made aware of this difference when I first started my platform. They were like, whoa, why are you saying that? And I was like, saying what? And they were like, it all goes to the land with Indigenous peoples. The land is our home. They do not have the standard social approved 4 walls and a roof. So instead of saying homeless, we say they're just houseless because the land is our home. It really depends, because a lot of it, there's a name for it, and it is, I can't remember what it's called. It's moving out homeless, and it is when people move from across to better themselves, and they end up in these urban areas. So then you would have the Dene people, you would have the Cree, you would have people from all over that come to these major cities being like, oh, I'm going to better my life. And then they fall into houselessness because of poverty levels and wage increases and decreases and all of those things. So you see a lot of mix of different people when you are on the streets here talking to these people. So I actually don't have a beauty title. I am with Personality Pageants Canada. It is all based on advocacy, platform, empowerment, and who you are as a person rather than what you look like. So when I first pursued that, I started my pageant journey in 2023, and I actually competed twice before I won my very first title. I won my first title in February, and I'm also your Miss Queen Teen Alberta 2024. And then I won Canada in August, and I kind of just chose it because I have always been a very active community member ever since I was younger. I won Volunteer of the Year award when I was in 3rd grade. Like, okay. So when I started pageantry, I was like, wait, I don't have to look like the girls that I see on TV and other pageantry, because the way I had it in my mind was, you must be so tall, you must be this, you must be that. And I was like, I'm 5'2". Maybe not. So when I first saw that it was all about advocacy and things like that, it really drew me. And plus, I also just moved to Alberta. I knew nobody. So I was like, okay, this is the perfect time for me to meet people that actually have the same interests as me, especially with community and advocacy and platforms. So that's what drove me into pageantry. Of course, I run into so many girls, and we all have different advocacies. I've met so many different girls where we all advocate for significantly different things, and they're all very specific, right? So a lot of that comes to is collaborations between platforms. I've collaborated with other girls that advocate for mental health, and we put together things that are based with their platforms of mental health, and as well as mine with houses and how those go intertwine. And you also get to hear like, oh, this is my platform, and this is what started it, and this is why I advocate for it. And it kind of makes you like turn your head and you're like, wow, like that's really great. Like I didn't even know that. And you find out all of these different things about advocacy and platform. I use Instagram specifically for mine, and I also provide a website as well, so it's accessible for both. I think it's also available on Facebook too, where people can share on there. Other people, they do websites, they do blog pages. Most people do Instagram because it has such a far reach now too, and especially with those younger generations who don't really know, or it's not taught in schools or through the textbook and things like that. I've gotten both positive and negative things because people instantly look at me and they're like, oh, but you're white. And that's the thing that I get a lot is people are like, are you actually Native, or why are you advocating for this? You aren't Native. And I have to go down the story of, well, I do have my status card and my mother's Native. I have to go through that story all over again. And that's the biggest part for me is that. Or other people are like, oh, wow, like you're doing so good. Like this is like, I've never heard of any of this before. Like, why isn't this more out there? Why aren't more people talking about this? And it's like, that's why I do what I do, is because people don't know this. And especially with me, they see a crown and a sash for the youth, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is someone I need to look up to. And that feeling makes me feel so happy when I go to smaller reserves and things like that, and I'm talking to the youth and they have a little spark inside of them and they want to do something similar. So most recently I was in Yellowknife and I went to DLO, and I was absolutely terrified because I get scared talking to anybody who's within the grades of 10 and 12. But doing that and being there, it opened up my eyes a lot, because these kids saw me and they were like, oh my gosh, because they don't see that every day, as in when I'm in Edmonton or somewhere in the cities, and they're like, okay, whatever, it's literally just another pageant girl. But when I went there, they were like, you came here, you chose to come and see us. And then I have that one-on-one conversations with them, and they kind of, you can see their brains kind of like clicking of like, oh, like she came here to talk to me and she's actually spreading information and it's educational. And then it sparks some girls to be like, hey, I want to start pageantry. Like, I like what you do and I like to advocate for things too. So I've actually been coaching girls from Yellowknife and other girls from Edmonton who are part of the Dene First Nations, and I've been coaching them to go on their pageant journey as well. Bring more Indigenous rep into the pageant world. There's not very many of us, and it depends on like the organizations and things like that, but there's not very many Indigenous women in pageantry, especially with titles. They might be delegates, but not with titles, and that's something I would want to see more of, is more Indigenous women receiving titles and following their dreams.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. In 2015, Ashley Collingbull became the first Canadian and first First Nations woman to be crowned Miss Universe. In the ensuing media frenzy that followed her historic win, she began to use her platform to be the voice for Indigenous issues. During the federal election happening at the same time, she helped push the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls to the forefront of political discussion. Let us return to the conversation as Alicia shares her future plans.
So my reign is up in August of 2025, but after that I go internationally and I will be competing for a universe title or world title. So that is very exciting, and I cannot wait for those international opportunities, especially being an Indigenous woman and representing on stage Canada specifically, going for a universe title or a world title or whatever international title that might be. My coach for all my pageants is Emma Morrison. She is Miss World Canada 2022, and she's actually getting ready to go compete at Miss World. So I get those interactions like that. I've had conversations with Ashley Collingbull, Miss Universe Canada 2024. So it's really nice having those people that already have those high going into international titles, and they're Indigenous women. So I'm able to be like, hey, like, I'm also doing something similar. I have a Canada title, and now I know that I'm going higher up. Like, can you tell me it's going to be okay? Or is like, can you tell me what it's like and what I'm about to walk into, kind of thing. So my dad actually worked there before I did. My dad was an ice road trucker for years and years. My dad's still a truck driver to this day. And he started up in the mine, and he was like, you should come and work here. It'd be great for you. You'd have time to do this. You'd have 2 weeks off. And I was like, okay, but like, no, I don't want to go there. Like, it's so far up there, kind of thing, right? Because it's on the border of Nunavut and the Northwest Territories. Then after him convincing me many times, I finally applied, and I've been working there now for 2 years. It was a lot. I was like, why am I here? But at the same time, afterwards, I was like, okay, I'm familiar. Like, my dad was there too, so I wasn't like as terrified as I should have been. But now I won't go back. I love rotation work. I love having the 2 weeks off to do absolutely anything I want. Like me being here right now, considering I got out of work on Monday and it's Saturday. So that's really great, and it gives me time to do my pageants, and I get to work, and I like meet so many people from across Canada. There's people that work there from Newfoundland in the territories, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, I get to meet so many people and hear about what they do for work and how they like it and things like that. I work in the accommodations right now, so we run all the accommodations. Sometimes I'm working the commissary upstairs, I'm cleaning rooms, it's that kind of thing. But I'm hoping I will get into a trade one day and do something like that. Probably a haul truck of some sort, I think, would be something I'd be comfortable doing. so it's not as scary, but not an underground haul truck. I think I might cry if I did that, going all the way underground with that big of a machinery, but probably something like that. It's like one of those big yellow Tonka trucks, and they haul all of the ore with the diamonds filled of it from the bottom of the pits up into the top of the pits, which gets taken by other trucks, and then they take them, sort through it. It's like a big conveyor kind of thing. I recently met with one of the policy members, and I discussed the issue. I was like, hey, this is what's going on in Edmonton. Like, have you seen this? Do you know of this? And I spoke about it, and I got nothing in return. And I was like, okay, well, just by you telling me that you understand what the issue is, but you're not going to give me any information, that's when I know I need to go further, and I need to push and push and push and push and push until there is some kind of action, not just words saying that, oh, we'll get to it kind of thing, right? And that's what we need, is we need those people to recognize the issue and that it's real and it's not just something you're just seeing. I'm not exactly sure. Like, when I was meeting with these policy members, I spoke about what I wanted to speak about, which was my houselessness specifically. And when I come and talk about residential schools, I'm very short and sweet with it. I don't want to bring too much into it, because it's like, okay, now you're just focusing on residential schools when people hear it over and over and over again. But that's not the exact point. It's bringing awareness to these, being like, hey, this happened. We need to recognize this happened, and that this is the outcome that has happened from this. And I've talked about it lots with intergenerational traumas and things like that. So that's specifically with that. But I also talked about with truth and reconciliation as well. And sometimes it's in one ear and right out the other kind of thing. I want to see more change. I want to see more housing. We've seen a lot of traditional housing succeed. And right now it's like they keep opening more housing or resources specifically with churches. And my deal is how many Indigenous peoples are going to want to step foot into a church after everything that's happened? So what I specifically want to see is more shelters opening up and more housing and more grants with that. Like, Edmonton doesn't even have a women's shelter anymore. That was one thing I found out when I was starting out my platform, is that I did a quick Google search. I was like, oh, I want to see where the women's shelter is here. I don't know where it is. I'm new here. And it showed that it closed down months ago. So that's the biggest thing with me, is I want to see more shelters opening up and more resources available for these people experiencing houselessness. So biggest thing too, especially with women, is the domestic violence and things like that, and them having no place to go, which also resorts into houselessness, because there's 12 dimensions of houselessness, and that's actually one of them, is nowhere to go. And with things like that, it's about seeing where can they go, and then you look at where they can go and they're all full. So then they end up onto the streets. Then you have to talk about, okay, like domestic violence and people with children, mothers, and things like that, and then you see them onto the streets. And people don't recognize that. They don't see the issues and how many different dimensions there are and how many people are actually experiencing this, not just what people see as drug users or people that are just experiencing poverty. It's something that we struggle with all the time. I have cousins that have experienced houselessness and came out of it. I have aunts and uncles that have also experienced it and either come out of it or still into it because they're still in it because of the lack of housing availability for them. So right now I'm in Prince Rupert for the next week doing events here with all the Indigenous youth. I can also be found on Instagram, which is Alicia_Danielson. And then I have my platform as well, which is Whispers Between the Braids, also on Instagram. And I can also be seen on the Personality Pageant's Instagram as well.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
It was once British Columbia's largest producer of silver. The mine operated for 13 years, producing 2,219,480 kilograms of silver, 15,802 kilograms of gold, and 84,086 kilograms of copper. In this final segment of Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1980.
Houston Equity Employee Relations Supervisor Elmer Bornman explains.
Well, everybody seems to talk about silver all the time because we are
concentrate.
We are called a silver mine. It is actually a copper concentrate that we make. It's the building you see behind you here is the concentrator. We mine a rock. You've seen the open pit, where the pit will be, and it's a standard milling procedure. There's nothing untoward about it. It's a routine concentrator. We make a copper concentrate because the silver values go with the copper, and that is then shipped to Japan. And there's also gold in the concentrate as well that we get paid for. but it's a copper concentrate that we make.
The ore is taken out of the ground and put through different procedures through large drums or whatever. Can you explain that to me?
Okay, we drill and blast the rock, or ore as we call it. It is handled with electrical shovels loaded into trucks. The trucks dump it into a crusher. It goes through the various stages of crushing. Then we have the grinding process. Then it goes through flotation where the reagents are added. Then you have the drying process, and then you have a concentrate.
The very existence of the mine is a small triumph for Placer Development Limited. Placer owns 70% of the equity operation. The mine site was abandoned in 1964 because of impurities in the ore, declared not feasible for operation. But since then, a process to be housed in a leach plant to remove those impurities from the ore has been developed. The final product will have greater market acceptance. The unleached ore would be marketable, but a mining operation wouldn't be profitable enough.
Now, the leach plant, which is going to be coming on stream in January sometime, will be the final stage. It will leach out the antimony and the arsenic, and then the final product will be shipped to Japan. But all you see is a powdered form. You don't see a metal. You can't see the metal.
I understand the leach plant is the first of its kind in North America. Can you explain a little bit about that?
It is the first of its kind in the world. We weren't able to borrow the technology from anybody else. It's a brand new ball game. Up to a point, the process does resemble the process that takes place in a craft paper mill, but just up to a point. From then on, it's completely new technology. And that is one of the main reasons why it's coming on stream so late.
What exactly does it do?
It takes out these two undesirables I mentioned earlier, the antimony and the arsenic. It removes those two undesirables. The smelters don't want them.
And why is it the first of its kind in the world? How will that help the production of the concentrate?
Well, I don't know if it's going to help anybody else, but it's because of the particular peculiarities associated with our ore body here. That's why it sat here for so long before it was developed. People didn't know how they were going to remove these other minerals and still make a profit. And our company come along and decided they could do it.
So the initial cost of $8.5 million for the design of the leach plant will be more than offset by the greater return on the ore, especially when looking at the life expectancy of the mine. Additional modifications may be necessary to the leach plant after startup, which may mean more delays. The mine provides 225 new jobs in the area, with an annual payroll of over $4 million. The workforce will include heavy equipment operators, electricians, machinists, technical and clerical staff. Most of the workers will be from the Houston area. How many of those employees will be local?
I haven't got a breakdown of the percentage, but quite a few of them are local right now, and we will hire as many local people as we can.
And I understand with a shortage of skilled tradesmen in BC and in Canada, you are probably experiencing those problems as well. How will you handle this?
Well, we are experiencing problems, not as much as some people perhaps. We are at the moment short of heavy-duty mechanics, and we are going to advertise again shortly and see what success we may have. We are doing very well in the other areas, millwrights, electricians, welders. We will have a training program. We plan on doing that, having a fair number of apprentices on our payroll. We believe strongly in training our own people and giving opportunity to young people to advance.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.